Hello and welcome to our Defence Monthly show where Defence Editor Jon Lake joins me in the studio.
Hello.
And Defence correspondent Jay Menon is on the line from New Delhi.
Hello.
Well, he and me and all of us are going to talk about some of the issues affecting our emerging markets across South Asia, Arabia and the Middle East. But first, a message from our sponsor about a major event for the defence industry.
Welcome back. There's been a big leadership change in South Africa insofar as the armed forces are concerned. Our South African defence correspondent Sam Basch reports from Pretoria.
The chief of the South African National Defence Force, General Solly Shoke, retired after 10 years in that position, a rather long tenure in my mind. Holding office for so long obviously holds up promotions right through the ranks, as you can imagine. His replacement is General Rudzani Mapanya, sworn in on May 28, in the presence of President Cyril Ramaphosa, the Commander-in-Chief of the country's armed forces. The retreat parade in the military town of Thaba Tshwane in Pretoria involved paratroopers and a gun salute while formations of aircraft roared overhead. Interestingly, General Mapanya has a long career leading South Africa's Special Forces, arguably the first chief of the SANDF from this mustering. On June 4, Lieutenant General Wiseman Mbambo was formally inducted as Chief of the South African Air Force at the historic Air Force Base Swartkop. The change of command parade also served as farewell to the outgoing Air Force Chief, Lieutenant General Fabian Msimang, whose retirement came after an unusually long 8 years in that capacity. In a poignant ceremony, Msimang handed his successor a special handmade dagger, the symbol of authority of South Africa's Air Force chiefs. Lieutenant General Mbambo is probably the first holding that position without wearing pilot's wings.
Thanks, Sam. So the new Air Chief is the first not to wear pilot's wings. Does that indicate something about South Africa's Air Force, that it seems to be struggling to get the equipment it needs? Is it struggling to get the personnel that it needs?
No, I don't think so. They are clearly good and competent officers who could have taken his position. I think he is a very experienced man. Incidentally, he's quite an academic. I think they're taking it from that point of view that he's a strategic thinker and not necessarily a pilot. Pilots obviously can think strategically, but in this instance, this man has good experience in analyzing situations and working his way through that. That I think is probably one of the reasons. I'm not privy to what went on behind the scenes in deciding who should take this job, but he's clearly a good man for it.
Now, Sam, you've been watching and covering South African defence for a good few years. Do you see this as a kind of positive move, of a bounce back, and that perhaps the government might now have confidence in the Air Force and in its new leadership?
Yes, I have to be honest. The Air Force has a serious funding problem, not necessarily only the Air Force, the entire Defence Force. And that translates into equipment that is outdated. We actually have a maritime patrol capability of aircraft 75 years and older. Our transport aircraft, two of them actually participated in this parade, the C-130. It's a C-130BZ in South African parlance. Those actually came in 1963. That's almost 60 years ago. So the Air Force, like the other arms of the Defence Force, has a serious problem. But the performance they put on the other day was indicative of a force that is still very much professional and still doing a hell of a good job. The government obviously has to look at a replacement of some of the equipment. And I think with COVID, obviously, that is put on a back burner. So we'll have to see how it goes. But the government is confident that our forces are professional and can do the job that they're meant to do in terms of the Constitution.
Well, thanks, Sam. That's great, and good luck with that. John, there's been something quite interesting happening against the fight against Daesh.
Oh, there certainly has. Really major step change. The multinational coalition against Daesh received a real boost this month in the shape of the new British aircraft carrier, the HMS Queen Elizabeth. The carrier's embarked F-35 jets joined the fight against Daesh, carrying out their very first combat missions from HMS Queen Elizabeth. Royal Air Force F-35s have previously participated in what the UK calls Operation Shader, operating from the British base at Akrotiri in Cyprus, but the latest operation marks the first use of a British carrier in the region since Libya in 2011. Moreover, underlining the fact that this is very much a global operation, the F-35s operating from the Queen Elizabeth were a mix of RAF aircraft from No. 617 Squadron, the Dam Busters, and US Marine Corps aircraft from Marine Fighter Attack Squadron 211. This marked the first combat mission flown by US aircraft from a foreign carrier since 1943, when US aircraft operated from HMS Victorious in the South Pacific. Captain James Blackmore, commander of the Carrier Air Wing, said that the level of integration between the Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force and the US Marine Corps was truly seamless and a testament to how close we've become since we first embarked together last October. British Defence Secretary Ben Wallace said that the use of the carrier offered real reassurance to the UK's regional allies and demonstrated the UK's formidable air power to our shared adversaries. The Carrier Strike Group is a physical embodiment of global Britain and a show of international military strength that will deter anyone who seeks to undermine global security, he said.
So, John, those kind of global threats are happening, aren't they? I mean, Africa is becoming very important to people.
Absolutely. As the battle against IS, Daesh, is starting to really be won, as they're completely degraded, the importance of Africa really assumes a new and vital importance. You know, IS might be beaten, Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda in Africa, those are the new threats. Those are still needing to be tackled.
So watch that space. Well, of course, there have also been concerns about Hezbollah's rising influence in Lebanon. And with country in economic chaos, it's whether the Lebanese Armed Forces, the LAF, are able to manage this. This month, the US, Russia, China, the GCC, EU and the UN met in a French-sponsored conference to talk about the issue. And the LAF commander, General Joseph Aoun, described the situation simply. It's extremely hard for a military commander to seek support from foreign countries, he said, when his own state is not capable of acting or even cutting budget. The situation is critical. If unmitigated, the economic and financial crisis will inevitably lead to the collapse of all state institutions, including the LAF. Now, that's a pretty damning statement, and although it's overstretched, the LAF remains a crucial pillar of the Lebanese state. Its cohesiveness and professionalism is the key to preserving the country's stability from more risks, and it's the only legitimate power in the presence of armed groups such as Lebanese Hezbollah. Lebanon faces one of the worst economic downturns in its history, exacerbated by the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic and the huge explosion in the port of Beirut. On top of those factors, the country hosts the highest number of refugees per capita in the world, with approximately 2 million Palestinian and Syrian refugees calling Lebanon home. Well, the LAF drew up a $100 million wish list with $40 million for medical supplies and $60 million for food supplies and salaries. And pledges were offered by several of those participating countries. So moving on, and we're going to go to Jay Menon now. And Jay, training seems to be pretty high on the agenda, doesn't it? There, what's happening?
Thanks, Alan. India recently floated a request for information to lease at least 20 basic trainer aircraft for training the rookie pilots of the country's Air Force. And as you know, leasing is a new trend which is being witnessed in the Indian defense sector. The Indian Air Force is facing a critical shortage of basic trainer aircraft, and the rookie pilots in IAF go through a three-stage training involving the Pilatus, MK2, the Kiran trainers, and finally the Hawk advanced jet trainers before they fly into the fighter jets. As the Kiran are approaching the end of their service life, some amount of stage 2 training is being done on the PC-7. But since most of the rookie pilots are flying directly from the stage 1 to the final stage, so there is a basic trainer aircraft which is in the middle, which is missing. So that's what the Indian Air Force is trying to plug.
So, Jay, presumably this is all as a result of delays to the indigenous HTT-40.
That's correct. The Indian Air Force has already ordered 70 of these HTT-40 trainer aircraft, and the HAL is busy building that. And so by the time the delivery happens, we need to have at least 20 trainer aircraft. So that's why this leasing has happened.
Okay, I understand. Now, what aircraft types are the Indian Air Force looking at, Jay?
They are looking at something like the L-39NG built by the Sheikh Aero Vodochori, the similar types.
And Jay, if I can also follow on from that, I think the Indian Air Force has also been doing training exercises this last month, I think with the Americans.
That's right. The Indian Air Force last month along with the Navy, participated in a 2-day passage exercise with the US Navy's Carrier Strike Group, USS Ronald Reagan, which transited through the Indian Ocean region on India's western seaboard, that is south of Kerala's Thiruvananthapuram. And Indo-US military exercise. This comes a month after China and Pakistan conducted an Air Force level joint military exercise in Tibet to target warships, launch land attacks from sea, and sharpen air defense skills. And the Carrier Strike Group is a mega naval fleet comprising an aircraft carrier accompanied by a large number of destroyers, frigates, and other ships. The IAF has a jointly simulated attack scenario such as targeting warships with jet drones from the USS Ronald Reagan, and the exercise was part of the anti-submarine warfare operations to find the submarines in the Indian Ocean region, especially that of China.
Well, thanks, Jay. And we're going to stick with training now and look at South Africa, where there's a boost for technical training to help find the essential engineers going forward. Paramount Group has moved its expanding Technical Aviation Academy to a central location at Wonderboom Airport near Pretoria. In a move that's seen as vital for securing a next generation of young Africans looking for a career in aviation and defence, it's offering internationally recognised aviation courses to train Africa's future aircraft technicians, as well as demand for these professionals right across the continent and indeed around the world. Well, our South African defence correspondent Sam Basch is still with us on the line from Pretoria, I hope. Sam, yeah. It's great to see Paramount driving through change to get a focus on practical training where there is so clearly a need.
The government made some mistake some years ago by closing technical colleges. And the focus was really on university. And I think that was a serious mistake because anywhere in the world where you look, even in the most advanced countries like Germany and Switzerland, technical people are required all across the board. And I think in aviation that is equally so, and probably more stronger, because the transformation of our industry is very important. I think with the government focusing on transformation, they want to see more young black people and being brought in. And I think because the colleges were closed many years ago, a college like this one, a training facility, that Paramount is hosting now is the way to go.
And a bit more good news for the South African defence company Paramount, because their US subsidiary, along with technology company Leidos and Verdex, have reached the final selection of the US Special Operation Command's armed Overwatch flight demonstration program. The three collaborators are amongst 5 teams that have each been awarded a total of $19.3 million for the demonstrations, which should be happening any time now. And the Bronco 2, of course, is a platform based on Paramount's Moari aircraft, which is built in South Africa. So, John, what's your views on that?
Of course, the Armed Overwatch programme is not, as yet, a formal procurement. There is a 75 aircraft requirement there, but it's just a flight demonstration. And it's interesting to note, I think, that the US Special Operations Command is looking at 5 very different classes of aircraft to meet that requirement, and not necessarily at what will be the best contenders. So the aircraft being evaluated at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida are the Textron Defence turboprop trainer-derived 86E Wolverine, as well as L3's crop sprayer-based 80-802 Skywarden, MAG Aerospace's MC-20B Guardian, a version of the Caravan, a single turboprop utility aircraft, and the Sierra Nevada C-145 Wile E. Coyote. And now that's a new version of the twin-engined M28 Skytruck utility aircraft. Now, of course, in addition to those is Paramount's Bronco, which defies easy classification, but it is the only one of the contenders that was designed from the ground up as a purpose-built counterinsurgency platform. Conspicuous by their absence in this are what are arguably the 2 leaders in their respective fields. Now, those are the Embraer SNC A29 Super Tucano, based on a turboprop trainer, and IMAX's Archangel. Now, while those who have watched previous US light attack programs may despair of the USAF ever actually procuring a light attack aircraft for its own use, just the US seal of approval for one of these aircraft could be of pivotal importance for that aircraft's wider export prospects.
Well, good luck, Paramount, with that. It'd be really great to see that program really take off and get that seal of approval from the Americans.
Certainly would.
Fingers crossed. Another nation that's really marketing its equipment is Russia, whose Rosenborn Expo has been in the Côte d'Ivoire this month at the Shield Africa 2021 event, and they've been pushing helicopters, armed vehicles, and everybody else. They've actually done more than $1.7 billion worth of defence trade in Africa over the last 3 years. So, John, that's quite interesting, isn't it? That they're trying to get back in.
I think they have seen the traditional market, which they almost had a monopoly over in Africa and in the developing world, really being encroached upon very rapidly by China. And so you can see this as a bit of a fight back from Russia to avoid losing, as you say, a very lucrative market.
Because what I find odd, John, is that some of the Western manufacturers are not so interested in Africa. Is it just because it's lower budget than they would get from, say, the Middle East?
To a certain extent, there are lower budgets, but also there are political difficulties. The Russians and the Chinese, let's be honest, let's be frank, they don't much mind about the human rights record or the perceived human rights record of a particular customer country, whereas Western defence companies are absolutely handcuffed by that. And even if a country is actually squeaky clean and a beacon of good practice, if it hasn't been recently, the Western politicians might not have caught up, and so there may still be restrictions. And I think that's the biggest factor. A reluctance to deal with regimes whose history and whose record may be less than, a traditional Western market.
Okay, can I just go? We've heard this week from diplomatic sources in the region that expressing some concern or noting China's attempts now to sell even more into the Middle East, particularly the Gulf. Is that going to work?
At a certain level, yes, it will. You know, if you're looking for artillery or if you're looking for nice, cheap armoured vehicles for your National Guard or your police force, then there's no reason for not buying from China. However, with the exception of Iran, who are obviously very constrained as to where they can buy from, most of the region, the nations in the region, particularly in the GCC, are not thus constrained, nor are they constrained by money. And Chinese military equipment, and particularly aircraft and helicopters, still have that reputation of being a bit cheap and cheerful. So not likely to make big inroads with those. But of course, when you've got niches where the West either can't or won't export, I mean, for example, armed drones, there's a real problem with exporting those even to your good friends. And China can jump in and take market in areas like that, particularly. Look at the profusion and proliferation of wing loom drones everywhere. Yeah. So China in the news again, Alan, but we're out of time. So until we see you again next month, goodbye.
Thank you.
How do we achieve ultimate defense interoperability? Inspired by Vision 2030, we are introducing the first of its kind, the World Defense Show. Integrating land, air, sea, satellite, and security.